All right, it's a big moment. Been working on this for a year and a half. We got the power pulled. Now today I'm gonna flip on the first thing that actually is powered by the garage. Let's see if it works. Hold up. Try it now. Well, it's a beautiful sight. Pole standing there with a conduit going up it. May not seem like much, but it's been a long time coming to get to this point in my mind. It's been about, I would say, 18 months I've been working on the power situation here. And I thought I'd make a little dedicated video to just the power, kind of explain the process and the challenges and the risks and all that stuff about it. You know, it's kind of a strange situation because a lot of builds or garages, houses, whatever, it's no big deal. It's almost an afterthought, right? We're just going to build a house and there's a pole, drop it in, overhead line into it one day, and it's almost nothing. With this, it was a major consideration. I had to think through way ahead of time and keep working the process to get it to where it needed to be, and to the point I could feel comfortable building the garage back there and be able to get power to it. So maybe just start off showing what they did. So I think a couple days ago they came in, brought a track machine down through here, had an auger, bored it, set the pole, pulled the line, and cut the old pole out, moved the Sudden Link line over. And that piece actually went pretty smooth. I was worried about how that would go, but I'll explain that here some more in a minute. But just to kind of recap, last summer ran a 3-inch conduit all the way through here, up and around the front here, which in and of itself was a major challenge. I'm trying to get a backhoe in here and deal with all the spoil. It's real tight through here. I've only got a little bit of room to work with. And 3.5 feet is fairly deep, a lot of soil to move. Also had gutter drains to worry about that go underground here. I was worried about hitting my sewer line that comes up and around. Of course, I got a lot of work to do in here next summer and get this cleaned up. But it comes up through here. And here's my meter and my disconnect. The disconnect's on the right. It's like a 200 amp breaker that the power company could open that up and close it if there's a fire or something like that. But so trying to think where to even start with this story. Maybe I'll kind of go inside here for a second and show you the inside. Here's the breaker box. I've only got one receptacle hooked up right now, which is the requirement to get it inspected. But basically, starting back in, I don't know, September of 21, that's when I was looking at building at the top of the hill. Whole separate location. You probably heard me talk about it in another video. I remember all about that. And one of the major factors with that was the power. There was no good way to get it up there. And it was a huge risk in terms of, they said they could do it if they could get an easement through like 4 different properties. Those properties are all different people that have no incentive to cut trees down on their property and give me a power line through there. One of them was in jail. It's like an abandoned property in legal limbo. So who in the world, what's the chances you can make that come together? And even then it was gonna be a lot of tree cutting. I think they quoted me around $10,000 just to get it to my property. If they could even get an easement through there. So it was just a major headache, and there was no better way to get it there. So that was one leading factor in having me switch down to the bottom of the hill down here. But even getting down here wasn't just a walk in the park. I knew it was gonna be still challenging, but probably more doable. And that's where we came up with the idea to come around the front of the house like that. And again, people told me it's gonna be tough, it's tight through there. All the risk of hitting stuff underground. You're adding more bends to it than what you're supposed to have. See, really you're not supposed to have any bends in that pipe. It's just supposed to be the 290s on each end that come up, because there's a limit on how much they can pull that wire through. And they, I basically adding long sweeping bends. So is that too much? Who knows, And all I could do is just go for it. So I put all that in last summer. I think it's about 250 feet of 3-inch conduit, which that stuff's not cheap these days. I had about $2,000 just in the conduit, and you hate to spend $2,000 for something you don't even know is going to work, way before we even started building the garage. But that's just the way it goes. You got to take a risk at some point, but there was another risk to it. And then let's see what happened next. So we got the ditch dug. That part went, I'll say, smooth. We had some challenges with that. Quite a job. Again, a lot of risk with rolling the tractor. I was concerned about losing it over the hillside. So anyway, we got the garage built. We just stubbed the pipe up next to the garage for the time being. Then it comes time to start getting the meter base in, the disconnect, and then the breaker box here, which is what you're looking at. And of course, the way the process works is you get all that installed, and then you got to have an inspector come inspect it, and basically, again, just have one receptacle hooked up before AEP will come out and pull the line and install it and set a pole and all that. And it was, there's a lot of code requirements to try to figure out how picky is the inspector going to be about certain things. Well, we went through this process. I got it to where I thought I was basically ready to inspect. I found an inspector, sent him some pictures of the situation, and he said that the meter box was the wrong box. See, what happened is they give you a work order number. You go down to an electrical company, like a supplier, and give them the work order number, and they give you a meter box that's supplied by AEP. Well, they didn't ask me, are you doing it above or overhead or below? You coming in from the bottom or the top? And I didn't even think to ask. I just said, here's my work order number. They said, here's the box, and that was the end of it. Well, when I started to look at it later, I realized there wasn't a 3-inch hole in the bottom, like a knockout. You can knock a hole in the bottom. And I talked to my dad about it. He said, well, we'll just cut a 3-inch hole in it. I was kind of scratching my head thinking, I don't know about that. It seems kind of odd that they expect everybody to try to find a 3-inch hole punch and punch that out themselves. And then even once we did that, it didn't really fit very well. I had to take a die grinder to the bushings, threads and stuff to get it to fit in there. That just didn't feel right to me. I was just like, it really shouldn't be this redneck for something that's so common. This shouldn't be a custom installation on underground conduit. It's just I don't know what the percentage is, but a high percentage of installs, I'm sure, are underground like that. And I can't imagine everybody trying to figure this out versus just having a 3-inch hole in the bottom. Well, sure enough, the inspector looked at it and said, that's the wrong box. You've got an overhead box, and I can't pass it that way. It's meant to come in overhead. So we talked to electric company. They basically said, yeah, oops, we gave you the wrong box, which was not the end of the world. But then we had to start all over basically with this setup. I shouldn't say start over. A lot of it had to be reworked to get that new box in there. So then we get to that, got the wire pulled and everything. Then I, kept texting pictures to the inspector. He'd have a few little things he wanted me to fix. Got to the point he said he was fine with it. We set up a date for him to come out and inspect it. On the day he's coming, he asked me where my address is, and I told him, and he said, are you in city limits? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, I can't inspect it. He said, that's the city has to inspect that. So I'm like, oh my goodness, here we go. Are they going to have way more requirements? How's that process going to go? I thought I finally had this worked out to get it inspected. So I called the city, and they said, yeah, we'll come inspect it. Meanwhile, it was a little questionable what they were going to say when they showed up, just in general about the garage build. They had never been up here to look at it since I got started. It's all permitted and stuff. And that guy ended up showing up and being pretty cool and didn't have anything to say about the garage and just passed it basically. So that went good. Could have went worse, or could have went bad, and it ended up going good, I guess you could say. And he put a sticker on it. Then it was a waiting game to get AEP out here. I think it took them 2 months between paying for it and inspection and all that. I was just on a waiting list for them to come out here, and they can't tell you when they're coming. And I was really wanting to be here for the job for various reasons. They don't tell you when. It's just like, we're going to show up one day, Well, sure enough, they showed up on a day I wasn't here, and I saw them on my camera working, so I ran home from work and worked with them on it. When I showed up, one of their concerns was the same as mine, being able to pull that wire that far. And, I thought it was most likely could pull it, talking to a few people, but the problem was if they couldn't pull it and it got stuck or something, whatever, the consequences are bad. Basically, I've got to come up with a complete new game plan here, or try to run all new conduit or something. Is not a simple fix. So I've purposely been hanging off putting siding on this side of the building just in case we had to redo something here with the box, or maybe, one option would be to bring it in overhead on this side which means I'd have to take all the siding back off that side and run overhead that way, which is going to look ridiculous coming through my property like that. Also, is going to have to cut a bunch more trees out. And then again, redo all this meter base, get it all inspected again, all that. And so I was really concerned about all that. But anyway, they said, yeah, it's gonna be a tough pull. We're gonna see what we can do. And my concern is you just never know who you get out here. Some guys they're just trying to get home as quick as possible. We tried pulling it didn't work, or is it some guy that really wants to get the job done? Who knows? And so I was worried about that. And I wanted to be here to see how hard they're actually trying to pull it, And well, anyway, ended up they set it up and had a jig set up with a ladder and everything. A couple guys working it, pulled it, got it in. So that piece was out the way. I was also worried about hitting rock where they were trying to set the pole at. That was a slight concern because then if I had to move the conduit to a new location, it wasn't going to be a simple, easy fix either. They didn't hit any rocks, so that wasn't good. And I was worried about them getting their machine down over the hill. It's such a mud mess over there. That ended up being a challenge. They tore up the yard pretty good. That's okay. I'd rather them tear up the yard and have to fix that than not getting the job done. So anyway, long story short, that piece went fairly smooth. And then we got done. They were leaving. They said, we're good. You got power back on everywhere, your house and your garage. I said, great, thanks. They left. I came out here to try it for the first time. That's why I put in the beginning of the video here. It was kind of like the big moment, like, let's see if it works. Well, it didn't work. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. What in the world is the problem now? There's only so many things, So I ran outside, made sure that the outside breaker was on, which it was. Made sure this one was on. I tried to flip the test thing on the GFCI receptacle and nothing. It just had no power anywhere. Started testing around inside the meter or inside the breaker box. Couldn't find any power on anything. And I'm like, well, these guys are gone. Now what? And luckily, one of them came back for some reason. I don't know what he was doing, but I don't know if he forgot a tool or something, but he came back, and I ran out there and yelled at him and said, hey, buddy, I don't have any power, And he's kind of like, well, it's not really our problem. For one thing, they're a contractor. It wasn't even AEP themselves. And he said, I can't do much about it. It's kind of your problem. We've got power to your meter, and the meter was on, I was like, well, I don't know, man. He's like, well, let me take a little bit of a look here at it. So he kind of came over kind of against probably his policy of even supposed to be poking around a customer's breaker box. But we started kind of tracing where it didn't have power to. And another thing too, I couldn't open the meter base because it had one of them locks on it now. So he said, let's cut this meter lock off and open it up and take a look inside. Well, sure enough, it had power coming into the meter, but nothing coming out. So it seemed pretty obvious to us it was something with the meter, and which was their problem. So he went and got another meter and came back, put a new meter in it, and now it works. So now I do have power. It's funny because I flipped that on, but I could do that before already. I was just having extension cords coming from the house. That's how I've been powering everything. So it doesn't feel like I've actually got anywhere yet, but it's kind of cool to see it being actually powered by the garage. After, again, an 18-month journey of trying to figure out how I'm going to do this, some risks involved, possibly a bunch of rework, and see it all come together and actually be able to turn a light switch on in here feels good. And now I can get moving with the wiring on the inside. Again, I didn't want to get too far with that because if I had to redo something, all that'd be wasted. So now I'm getting ready to go full force on the actual wiring. Again, I've done a little bit with the receptacles and stuff, but there's a lot more to do, in terms of all the overhead stuff, getting power to welding machines and the receptacles for the welders, I should say, and the air compressor, a hot tub hookup. We're possibly going to have a hot tub outside one day. Hot water tank, the furnace, just all of this stuff, garage door opener, all that stuff has to be thought through. How you're going to do the switching. I think I'm going to have 3-way switches. So like a switch over here, switch here, three on each one, powering up 3 different banks of lights. I'm gonna have a separate lights above the workbench. Just all those little things you got to kind of think through. And what type of wire do you need for each situation? And you don't get too much because it's expensive. You don't want to get not enough and have run out the Lowe's and get more. And just all those things I got to think through now and try to keep moving on that. And of course, I'm gonna be trying to do the siding now on the outside now that I feel good about this being done. So anyway, kind of a long video. I wanted to kind of keep it moving just because there's a lot of information there to get across. But again, quite the challenge in my mind versus somebody that just has a run-of-the-mill garage right next to a pole. All they had to do is just drop a wire into it. This was actually a huge piece of the the work that's went into the garage and the thinking it through and planning and all that. It was this wiring situation. So glad to get past it.